Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Hello and welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan. Thank you so much for being a listener. If you like what you hear today, don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever your favorite podcast player is. All right, so this is episode 157, and we're going to be talking about 3 ways that we can improve student writing. Now, I know when it comes down to wanting to improve writing, it's really just all about having our students practice more. It's that simple. But how do we get them writing more when they say they hate it or they find it really boring? So let's go over some 3 quick tips that you can use in your classroom immediately. Okay, the first one is free writing. Now, free writing isn't really something that we think about using with our lower elementary students, probably because some of them are really struggling to sound out words and just get words onto paper. I really remember doing free writing more in like high school, possibly junior high, but definitely high school. So it's really more of a secondary education technique that we don't see as often in elementary school. And I'm going to say, let's try to bring it back because it's really going to help just give students practice and working on their stamina, and it's just a really great technique, and it's super simple. It requires absolutely no prep, which is one of my favorite types of activities. So if you're not familiar with free writing, it's a time where you literally just let your students write. So it's in the title, free write. They're going to write about anything and in any style they want. Now, you might want to have to caution them about school-appropriate topics. Maybe you don't want them writing about bloody things, right? Because that's kind of what they tend to gravitate to, or talking about shooting in like video games. So make sure that you think through those kind of non-negotiables as you introduce this to your students. So I like to kind of give them a list and help them get started. So any style, anything they want to write could be something like they could make a book, right? Give them a bunch of paper, show them how they can fold it and create a book. And they love stuff like that because it's not a lot of time that we get to do that during our actual writing block. So when they can just like be creative with it, they love it and they'll run with it. So they can make a book, they can write a letter, they can make a card for somebody, or they can just write a story. It doesn't matter. It could be fiction, it could be nonfiction. The idea here is we just want our students to write. Now, if you like alliteration, you might want to try Friday free writes. It has a nice ring to it, right? Friday free writes. So every Friday, you're going to set aside like 15 to 20 minutes to give students time to just write. And that's really the only rule, is during free write time, you are writing. Writing something. It doesn't even matter. It can be a list about how you hate writing about writing, right? If students are struggling to come up with something to write about, as a class, maybe before you start your Friday free writes, you're going to brainstorm a list of all the things that is considered writing that they can pick from. Okay, I just mentioned a few things, the books, the letters, the cards, the stories, but maybe you guys can come up with more things, making a newspaper, making a blog post, making a podcast script, making a YouTube video script. I mean, sky's the limit, right? So there's lots of things as a class. You can just have them give you things and you write it down in an anchor chart, and then you pick what you find acceptable for your class. And then that's the list that they have to choose from whenever you have free write. So if you do try this strategy, I would love to hear about it. So as always, drop me an email, susan@sharedteaching.com, or you can leave it in the review that you make later. Okay. Idea number 2 is to write across content areas. Now, this is something that I've blogged about before, and I have a podcast episode to go with it. So it is episode 115. So when you're done listening to this episode, you might want to check that one out for some more in-depth ideas where I kind of tell you a little bit more about how exactly I would write across the content areas. So for this episode, this is just meant to be a short and quick. So I will leave you to that for another time. But another way we infuse more writing throughout the day, of course, is to try to build the writing within our content areas. So I feel like all the subjects lend themselves to writing responses. And I like to have my students write in math, science, health, reading, and social studies. And I'm sure I'm missing something somewhere in that list, but that's okay. During math, you're going to ask students maybe to pick a problem and write just a few sentences about how they solved the problem. It doesn't have to be this long essay thing or paragraphs and paragraphs. You just want to incorporate a little bit more writing throughout their day. So if they're just solving straight math problems and they're not doing word problems and they're not writing sentences, then they can't really practice that craft of writing complete sentences, right? So maybe ask them to do that in math. Just pick one problem, 2 to 3 sentences. How did you solve this problem? First, maybe give them sentence frames if they need that. But as they do it more and as they practice this more often, it will become ingrained and they will know how to structure the sentence, especially in math, right? Because the goal is to get them to understand that writing doesn't just happen during writing time. It happens all throughout their day. So let's move on to science. In science, maybe you're going to have them write the steps for the scientific process. Maybe they have a little notebook where they're taking notes in. Or maybe you want them to take notes on how they did an experiment. They're writing out the steps for that experiment. This is something I did a lot when I taught science in 2nd grade. So this one is one that I feel like really lends itself to writing because they're recording their experiment, right? So it's an easy way to just add more writing. And then if you enforce the idea of capital letters and periods for the sentence structure, that will help. Okay, reading. Of course, there's a plethora of things out there about reading responses, responses to reading, if I can get the order of my words right. So anything you can find about that, that's amazing. You're probably already doing a lot in reading. I know I was, because a lot of their assessments even are like handwritten sentences, right? They have to respond to the text evidence and say, on page whatever, I found that this character did this because, they're going back to the text, they're referencing it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today. That could be a whole nother podcast episode. But maybe they're writing a paragraph about the text-to-self connection they made to a story. Maybe you had a really great read aloud and you want them to write something after the read aloud. What did you notice? Or did you have a connection? What kind of connection was it? Let's move beyond just the traditional write a book report when we think about how can we get more writing from reading, and incorporate it along with the things that you're already doing. The idea here, and with a lot of my content, is I don't want you to work harder. I don't want to make things to be more of a burden on you, but I really want you to think of what you're already doing and just tweaking it a little bit. Okay. So then, of course, we have social studies or history, depending on what you call it. And maybe your students can just create a timeline of events. That's writing. It's a different style of writing. And maybe they can write a fiction paragraph, imagining they are in that place and time. Really get creative with it and have fun. Okay, again, if you want more information about writing across content areas, you're going to check out podcast episode 115, or you're just going to click on the link in the show notes and you can read the blog post about it. All right, my last tip for ways to improve student writing is to have writing centers. Now, you might already have word centers or phonics centers and think that you already have writing centers. While I think that those are really great centers, I would keep them. I want you to encourage you to add a center where there is some kind of written product that's a little bit more lengthy, right? So by this, I mean they're producing something that takes longer to write than a word that they sounded out. So it's not like the little task card where they just have to write, whatever word it is. I'm drawing a blank. Let's say they're sounding out the word coach and they write the word coach on the task card. I don't consider that a writing center, right? For a writing center, think about what they do in writing time. They're creating something meaty, right? So we want to use our writing centers to kind of mimic that, but in a more open way that gets kids excited about writing. So maybe the center is similar to the free writing idea, and they maybe pick a card, any card that they want. It doesn't have to be like, this is the card you're doing today, but maybe that card tells them ideas of things that they can produce. A card, a comic book, a letter, a story, a postcard, a book. And during that writing center time, they are working on that product. So if they pull the letter card, they're working on writing a letter. And then one of my favorite writing centers, of course, I'm a little biased, is my letter card and writing center. So in my center, I have letters, postcards, and like greeting cards. And when I taught second grade, I would change up the center every month to newly themed writing papers, postcards, and cards so the students wouldn't get bored. So they have the same process. They know what to expect when they go to that center. That remains the same all year long. But then the look of it, like so in Halloween time, they're looking at, pumpkins and fall leaves and things like that, but it's changing seasonally. So then in wintertime, now they're looking at, penguins and snowflakes and that kind of stuff, right? So it's changing, so it's a little bit more exciting because, now there's something new and this looks new and different. But they're still doing the same thing. They're still choosing a letter or a card or a postcard, and they get to write it to their friends. So they're mailing, quote unquote, mailing their letters and their cards to their friends by just putting them in their friends' little mailboxes. And it gives students a real purpose for their writing, which in turn makes them want to write more, especially if they write a letter back to their friends. So it really teaches what I feel is now almost like an ancient art of letter writing. Most kids don't know this. They didn't get the letter in the mail from grandma and have to write her back like I did when I was a little girl. So it's just a nice thing for me, I feel like at my age, is keeping that alive, right? Because not too many people do that anymore. We like text or, phone call or video chat, but there's no letter writing anymore. So I love this center. I'm a little bit biased. If you want to check it out, I do have a link in the show notes. I do have a general year-round theme, and then I have one for each season. So you can pick and choose. You can buy them for the whole year, and it's just such a simple, quick, and easy center to change out. And then it gets your kiddos writing a little bit more. Of course, you're not obligated, but if you're interested. All right, so that was 3 ways to improve student writing. We want to get them writing more. So we're just brainstorming ways we can get our students writing more. We could do like a Friday free write. We could incorporate more writing throughout our content areas because we have to teach them anyway. So where can I infuse a few extra sentences of writing within my content areas? And then, of course, some kind of writing center, whether it's mine or something else that you have, that's really helping them produce some kind of writing product that is more than just a word on a task card. All right, so if you have any other ways that you like to find more time to write in your day, please let me know. And if you visit the blog post, you can always leave a comment on the post so other people can see your ideas as well. Because here at Shared Teaching, I really want it to be a shared experience and you giving me your ideas as well. So thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for an all-new episode this coming Saturday. Bye for now. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Shared Teaching Podcast.